From the station working for you, this is WRTV News at 5:30, streaming now.
Now at 5:30, it's been a year-long process, but another local police department is about to get body cameras. Why it's taken longer than expected, but the hope officers have by getting this important equipment. And a revered member of Indianapolis Motor Speedway announces he is ready to retire. The career of Donald Davidson in moments. Chris.
At the top of our lineup today, there are some new questions surrounding how accurate COVID tests are with kids, what you need to ask to get the most reliable results. And demand for groceries across the country is still incredibly high, so we're looking into why jobs in warehouses still sit empty. And the pandemic's put a strain on all of our relationships, but we'll tell you why men may be having a hard time adjusting to the change in their friendships.
Only on WRTV, it's been years in the making. The city of Franklin will be spending thousands of dollars to have police officers wear body cameras. WRTV Investigates Rafael Sanchez discovered the plan was to have officers get their cameras this month, but the pandemic delayed the shipment of their equipment.
Franklin's finest will be the latest in a growing list of police departments to be equipped with body cameras. Kirby Cochran is the police chief.
Whether it be a domestic situation, a crash, a homicide, any type of crime, it's an impartial witness for us.
The department received some of its equipment, but not all, due to COVID-19. When these boxes are opened, Franklin's 53 officers will use the same technology currently on the streets of Indianapolis. Metro Police launched their body cam system this fall. Franklin will begin in the new year.
Make sure that we're developing policies and procedures that allow the video to be released when it needs to be released, not any sooner than it needs to be released without jeopardizing cases. But we just want the public to know that we are a transparent police department. We are trying to build that community partnership to the next level, and we believe this tool will help us get to that next level.
Franklin PD is also adding dash cams to every single squad car as part of this program. 5 years ago, Steve Barnett was on the city council, and the technology at the time was considered unaffordable. Barnett, who's now the mayor, says $565,000 will pay for the entire camera system, adding that by waiting, the city saved more than $1 million considering the prices back in 2015.
I believe this is a must-have. It's going to make our community a much safer place. It brings professionalism, integrity, trust. It's just a good tool to have.
So the new year will record the sights and sounds of every Franklin police officer on the job.
That was Rafael Sanchez reporting. The Franklin Police Chief expects to launch the body cam program in early January. The next big police agency to get cameras will be Indiana State Police. They told Rafael their goal is to deploy their body cameras this spring.
Okay, watch this. If I bend over just a little bit, you can't tell where my hair ends and the clouds begin. Another gray day across central Indiana. We'll brighten things up as we warm up as we go through the rest of the week. Something to look forward to. There's the north view, and right in the center of your screen starting to light up is Meridian Street or 31 as the city lights start to take over. Shelbyville's at 33. Otherwise, because of the blanket of cloud cover, not much of a temperature range. We're all just above the freezing mark. As I mentioned, our coldest night is tonight. Temperatures Wednesday and Thursday morning not as cool. We'll have a low temperature as warm as 44. That's Saturday morning, and that's right before the big temperature drop. During the day tomorrow, some breaks in the cloud cover, some early day sunshine, and then in the afternoon hours, the clouds will roll back in, kind of call it self-destruct sunshine. Temperatures struggle to make it into the lower 40s. The wind will remain relatively calm during the day tomorrow. We'll focus on warmer days ahead shortly.
This week will be key in learning more about a COVID vaccine. The UK plans to start administering the Pfizer vaccine tomorrow to frontline healthcare workers, home care workers, and people 80 and older. They're using hospitals as their primary distributors first. Now, the FDA meets Thursday to consider emergency approval of Pfizer's vaccine here in the U.S. Now, over the weekend in Russia, they immunized thousands of people with its own vaccine. Countries starting with all workers, not just healthcare, who are at highest risk of catching this virus, doctors and teachers included. The Russian vaccine was approved for use before its final human trial data came in, but they're not giving it to people over the age of 60 until that research is finished. Here in the United States, well, there are states that are handling vaccine distribution in different ways. Most are going with healthcare workers in direct contact with COVID patients first, but plans could change.
So we need to set realistic expectations that there'll be guidance that's different in different states. The guidance will evolve as we get more and more vaccine. And that doesn't mean anything's wrong or we've changed our minds. It's just the way it's going to roll out.
Now, that's the head of Louisiana's public health immunization program. They plan to let hospitals and EMS distribute the first doses to their staff. It's a strategy not just to protect these valuable workers, but hopefully get the public on board.
I'm really eager for them as the first group to really learn the science about the vaccine and step up and be vaccinated. I think that'll set our whole campaign in Louisiana and nationally on the right track.
Now, as for the cold storage of the vaccine, Louisiana doesn't see it as overly challenging. They also plan to use the state immunization information system to track who needs second doses and where the vaccine's being used the most.
I want us to keep going back to that. There will be challenges and issues, but what a wonderful opportunity to make a change in the trajectory of the pandemic.
The reality is it will be months before the general public will get the vaccine at a pharmacy or a drive-thru. Now, ahead in our lineup, we are learning more about why COVID tests might not be as reliable with kids, what parents should know before getting swabbed.
Welcome back to the news at 5:30. 2 people are in critical condition and a third is stable following a stabbing this morning on the east side of Indianapolis. This happened in the 300 block of North Arsenal Avenue. That's between East New York Street and East Washington Street. IMPD is calling this an isolated incident. Investigators have not released information about the victims or what led to the stabbings. Chris.
Doctors and researchers have noticed that coronavirus affects children differently. Now there are questions about how accurate COVID tests are in kids. One recent study done by several laboratories and hospitals in Massachusetts looked at the Binax Now rapid test. Now it had high accuracy rates in adults, but when it came to symptomatic patients who were under the age of 18, the accuracy rate dropped to just under 78%, and that rate decreased even more in asymptomatic children. Now, another paper published in Clinical Microbiology and Infection found the Pan BioRapid test. Well, that had a lower accuracy rate in children. It was only able to identify 62% of COVID cases in patients under 16 years old. Now, doctors have differing opinions on why accuracy rates may be different in children. One doctor tells Yahoo News that children's immune systems are just better at honing in on diseases and making them harder to detect. Now, a pediatric doctor that we spoke with says she hasn't seen a difference in accuracy rates, but if anything, symptoms may be different.
Sometimes the way the disease process goes about in these children can change. It can change, as we know, with obesity rates and things like that. But we have had it be successful with the infant age as well as on up.
There may also be some variation in the way the test is performed. The cotton swab is the same size for both adults and children, which means it could be more uncomfortable for kids.
Kids move around. If you have a little kid that you're trying to hold down, they're going to move around, and sometimes we really don't want to cause pain and cause tears, but you do have to get in that nose, do the couple turns, and be able to get a good sample.
Now, if you notice your kid is uncomfortable during the test or if the swab barely went into the nose, it is advised that you ask for the test to be redone. Abbott Laboratories manufactures both tests that we just mentioned, and it says that it still is looking at how accurate the tests are in asymptomatic patients. It also noted that the Binax Now test needs to be done within 7 days of the first symptoms experienced. Researchers with Abbott say symptomatic children tend to have low amounts of the virus. Now, next in our lineup, grocery warehouses are having trouble filling jobs. What they're doing to make sure store shelves still stay stocked. Grocery stores across the country are still busier than ever. But why are jobs in places that help get food to your table going unfilled? Chris Conti takes us inside a grocery distribution center.
Feeding the country during a pandemic is no short order. In fact, it's an incredibly tall one, stacked 60 feet high in warehouses across the country.
Our biggest challenge is keeping everybody safe.
That is Mike Violet. He's the CEO at Associated Grocers of New England.
Thank you very much for all that you've done.
We first met Mike back in March when Americans were buying food in record numbers.
Grabbing yams right now, it's just one pace, you know.
Workers in this warehouse could barely keep up. Shelves sat empty as suppliers couldn't keep up with demand for everything from paper towels to flour.
What we saw last March, you won't see that now. You know, the paper manufacturers have changed their lines and how they're producing and what they're producing.
Demand for groceries across the country is still up nearly 20% over this time last year. There are random shortages for things like glass mason jars.
People are cooking. People are eating at home and they're cooking. A lot of people learned to cook from last March forward and they enjoy cooking more and they're doing more of it.
This time around, though, Mike and other grocers are urging Americans to avoid panic buying as some states reimpose COVID restrictions.
There's really no need to just stock up. There'll be plenty of product. The food supply is very, very strong. And by people just stocking up, it just makes it harder for others to get products and makes people have more frequent stops to have to go to the store.
There's something else they've noticed here. Even with near record numbers of Americans looking for work, they're having trouble filling jobs. Warehouses and factories across the country have noticed similar trends. Part of the reason, workers are concerned about catching COVID and not filling open positions. Starting pay for a job here, though, is around $15 an hour. It comes with health care benefits and paid time off. But this is not the kind of job that can be done from home. And there's this.
I think a lot of it is the type of work that it is. It involves some heavy lifting to work in the warehouse and selecting cases, so it can be hard work.
But all that aside, these men and women will keep working to keep grocery stores' shelves stocked, to keep America fed during the pandemic. In Pembroke, New Hampshire, I'm Chris Conti.
One of the most recognizable and important figures at Indianapolis Motor Speedway is retiring. Donald Davidson, who has served as the track's historian for 22 years, announced his retirement today. Davidson's last day will be December 31st. Davidson, who developed a love for auto racing while growing up in Salisbury, England, first visited IMS in 1964. That's where he surprised people, including track owner Tony Holman, with the encyclopedic knowledge of the Indianapolis 500 and its participants. Davidson is believed to be the only person in the world to serve as a full-time historian for a motorsports racetrack. Davidson was inducted into the IMS Hall of Fame in 2010, the Indiana Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame in 2013, and the USAC Hall of Fame in 2017.
And what do you say? Congratulations, Donald. I hope you're watching tonight. And one thing we know for sure, you just don't turn that knowledge off, right? He'll keep adding to it. We just may not get to hear it quite as much. I can tell you from many conversations at the track with Donald over the years on our breakfast at the Brickyard, he is the nicest, most knowledgeable, patient, sincere guys that you'll ever meet. So congratulations to Donald. I love it that as a kid, he listened to the 500 on the radio, wanted to come over here, and not only did it meet his expectations, it exceeded it, and he's become a Hoosier. 32 in Castleton, 34 in Martinsville. Temperature slow to change this evening because of the cloud cover. Notice the north wind in Lafayette, Bloomington, and Indianapolis. That will set us up for a cold night tonight. We're headed into the middle 20s tomorrow morning, and during the day tomorrow, if we see some sunshine, and I think we will, it will be during the morning hours tomorrow. Then the clouds will thicken a bit during the afternoon. Here are optimistic forecast highs. A little cooler to the north and east, upper 30s, should be low 40s elsewhere. Average temperature is 41 this time of the year. We hit it right on the button there in Indy tomorrow. To the south, temperature slightly warmer. I think the noticeable change really starts to arrive as we get to Wednesday and Thursday. Notice what doesn't happen tomorrow evening. Generally, because of a southwest wind, our temperatures will be locked in place through the early overnight in the 30s. We'll talk about warmer days ahead and the weekend coming up.
Costco is keeping special hours for people who could be at high risk for COVID-19. At most clubs, the hours are weekdays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. and the hours are for people who are older than 60, those who have disabilities or compromised immune systems. Now, there's been a boost in the amount of people applying to med school this year, an 18% increase in applicants, according to the Association of American Medical Colleges. They believe that many people have just been inspired by healthcare workers who have been battling the pandemic this year. The effort to legalize marijuana on the federal level made history. Now, it still has a long way to go before anything becomes official. Legislation to remove marijuana from the list of controlled substances and remove marijuana convictions went to a vote in front of the full House on Friday. That's the first time that's ever happened. Lawmakers approved the legislation by a vote of 228 to 164 to send it to the Senate, where it does face opposition from the Republican majority. A spokesperson for the Drug Policy Alliance says passing the House was a great first step.
This will be huge in terms of moving the needle forward in Congress next year at the federal level, but also we hope that it'll impact states and localities who are grappling with this issue.
The Drug Policy Alliance says the goal was to get the MORE Act through the House. Now the focus turns to the new Congress and getting the bill the way they say it needs to look like in both the House and the Senate.
Next year, we plan to reintroduce the MORE Act in both chambers, not necessarily the final version that we saw pass, because through the Rules Committee process, on its way to the floor, there were some provisions added that we weren't necessarily happy with.
One of the changes made to the bill narrowed who would be eligible to have their marijuana convictions thrown out. Any bill not passed and signed into law by January 3rd, when Congress adjourns, will need to be reintroduced next session. It stands to be one of the biggest boosts to Americans and the economy, wiping out some student loan debt. Alicia Nieves shows us how this debt wipeout could work and whether it's likely to really happen.
President-elect Joe Biden campaigned on a promise to forgive some student loan debt, and now millions of Americans are hopeful that will happen shortly after he takes office.
I think it is one of the most accessible ways that President-elect Joe Biden has to stimulate the economy.
Suzanne Kahn is the Director of Education, Jobs, and Worker Power at the Roosevelt Institute and says Biden has two choices for immediate student loan forgiveness. One, push for Congress to include it in the next stimulus package. He's currently doing that and pushing for $10,000 to be forgiven. Two, if Congress doesn't include it in the stimulus package, Biden can issue an executive order by authority given to him in the Higher Education Act. Either option could eliminate student loan debt for roughly 15 million borrowers and reduce the debt of another 30 million Americans.
It is most likely through executive action, or at least the first movement we'll see around it is through executive action. And that's really just because the federal government owns 95% of student debt, and the Secretary of Education has the ability to cancel it.
I mean, my sense is it's not inevitable.
Neil McCluskey is the director of the Center for Educational Freedom at the Cato Institute and says student loan forgiveness, especially through executive order, could be the most controversial way to go.
There seems to be straws that certainly he can grab and say, look, this gives me authority to just sort of write off this debt. Other people say it's not clear in the law that he can do that. And so if he were to try to cancel debt through executive action, it would probably end up in court, and it would be a pretty long court battle.
So if you're at home wondering what this means for your student loan debt, ultimately, it is now more likely than ever before that some of your debt could be forgiven, but still nowhere close to guaranteed.
I don't think it's inevitable, but I do think it is exciting that it's on the table, and frankly, important that it's on the table.
I'm Alicia Nieves reporting.
Alicia, thank you. Now, ahead in our lineup, it is a challenge for all of us to not be able to see our friends in person. Why men may be having a harder time with this. Men may have a harder time maintaining friendships during the pandemic. An expert tells us that's because social distancing guidelines have forced men out of their normal ways of communicating.
Men tend to construct their friendships on a shoulder-to-shoulder basis, and women tend to use a face-to-face basis. So guys will get together and do things like sports, going to the sports bar, activities.
Professor Jeffrey Greif is the author of Buddy System, Understanding Male Friendships. He says it's rare for men to reach out to each other just to talk. Men also tend to be more cautious about just how much they share, and they only ask to do something together many times before the invitation is rescinded.
We're just not socialized to feel comfortable. We don't want to seem like we are stalking another guy for a friendship. Men don't want to appear too emotionally needy.
There are some activities that we can do while physical distancing. Greif says you can also try to get together over Zoom to watch a sports event or just play a game. Recognize it's not going to be as good as in person, but keep in mind this pandemic will eventually end. He says that this could also be an opportunity for communication and male friendships to improve. Now, it's probably no surprise that America's mental health is worse than it's been in the last few decades. Gallup asks people every November about how they feel about their own emotional well-being when it comes to mental health. Now, the positive news is 3/4 of adults still rated their mental health as good or excellent, but it's also down almost 10%. Now, that is the lowest since Gallup started the survey back in 2001. Now, we are seeing more cyberbullying during the pandemic with kids doing school from home and just more time in front of screens in general. Tomorrow, we're going to introduce you to the 20-year-old who's working to change that after being bullied herself, how her new technology works to stop people from sending the hurtful messages in the first place.
Temperatures will peak as we get to Thursday and Friday, well into the 50s. Then as we go to the weekend, we'll cool off Saturday, a windy and wet day to start the weekend. Then much colder, cold enough maybe for some Sunday morning flurries or snow showers. That's all for the news at 5:30. The news begins again at 6.